Welcome to this first podcast in my podcast series around vertical development. In this first episode, I'm just going to touch briefly upon the difference between horizontal development and vertical development, so it's very clear to you what vertical development is and what my focus will be in my podcast series. Let's start with the horizontal development. So horizontal development is the skills you are gaining. For instance, when you go to school, you get to high school, you get to technical school, university, whatever education you are taking, you're gaining more horizontal knowledge. So you are adding knowledge and competencies and you become wider in your skill set. That may be within marketing, finance, HR, you may become a doctor. Doesn't really matter what, it's just the concept of you adding skills in a certain field. That is what you call horizontal development. In horizontal development, you also talk about kind of stages. Which stage are you operating at that horizontal development? So when you're new, you're like a novice. So you are kind of beginning to understand what is all around. Then you reach the proficiency level where you can master it and you can execute it on a daily basis. And then some people will get to the expert stage where they are able and capable of teaching other people doing the same because they really understand it and they can articulate it and help other people understand it too. It is where most corporates are also investing a lot of the HR budget in people development, that is within horizontal development. So it may be a presentation skill course, it may be new course in finance or IT program or new marketing strategies and so on. So a lot of investments in corporates are taking place in the field of horizontal development. It makes good sense because it generates a wider skill set that the employees can use. However, not so often do corporates invest a lot in the vertical development. That is the softer skills in people. In some corporates, they will have something called like a leadership competency framework, kind of defining the skill set you are required to have to perform in a given role in the organization. But many corporates do not have these kind of setups. What is vertical development then? Well, it's around your agility basically. So it's your agility within context setting. How agile are you in understanding context? Seeing one context, how it interacts with other areas in an organization, how that context may influence another area and so forth. Really understanding how it's all kind of tied up and influencing each other. Another area is the stakeholder agility. So how do you see stakeholders? Are stakeholders something for you that is just something you need to manage to carry on with your job? Or do you really understand the benefit of stakeholders and how they can kind of help you accelerate the performance that you're trying to deliver? A third area is your creativity agility. So that is, how creative are you in finding solutions and approaches to address the challenges you have in your work? Some people will have a tendency to address a given challenge in the same way time after time after time, where other people may actually seek out new ways of trying to address the same to see if they can do it smarter, in a different way, more efficient way, or get a better outcome than they're used to. And then finally, it's around self-leadership. How good are you at leading yourself, managing yourself, and hence drive yourself as a person? And that is an area that really grows as you begin to become or reach the higher stages of the framework of vertical development. Vertical development is kind of a framework defined by different authors, and they operate with 5 different stages. There are stages below the leadership stages. That is the stage when, for instance, you're born, then you develop up and you get to a new stage when you are in high school and so on. I'll come into those stages at another point of time. So you have 5 vertical leadership stages. So the first one is the expert. The second one is called the achiever. The third one is called the catalyst. The fourth is called the co-creator. And the highest stage is called the alchemist. Why do I find vertical development so interesting? Well, because very often, for instance, when you get the horizontal development, you are learning a new skill that is often defined to what you do in your work life. Whereas if you're vertical developing, the skills you are gaining to become more agile in understanding stakeholders and approaching challenges, to lead yourself and engage with others and so forth, is also benefiting you at the personal level. So not only do you get stronger in managing your work life, because you gain more strength within these areas, but it also have a full impact on your private life. So for instance, if you become very good at leading yourself at work, you would typically also be very good at leading yourself in your private life. If you're becoming very good at managing stakeholders, i.e. people influencing your life at work, you will equally become good at understanding and managing them in your private life. And also your way of, for instance, approaching challenges in your work life. If you become more agile in that space to begin to see things in new ways and try new ways of doing things, in the same way you will apply that in your private life. So vertical development is really giving you both at the corporate side, your professional side, but equally much on your private side. And that's what really makes it interesting for me. Because people who vertically develop, they typically come across as very different people also in their private sphere. I also find the framework incredibly valuable when engaging with organizations, corporates, and leaders talking about leadership development. It helps identify where people are operating today. Then you can, through this framework, understand where should they preferably operate from to be successful in their current position. So what capacities are they in need of developing right now or strengthen to really do their current job successfully? Or which competencies and capacities should be developed for them to be ready to be uplifted to the next position in a given organization? So this knowledge really helps you to target what should you work on with a given person, or a person to understand what is it that they should work on right now to develop the right skills. So for instance, when I do executive coaching and I speak with people, it helps me set realistic targets for what people can achieve within a given period of time. Because working with development and personal growth takes time. It's not something you just do and go to school. It really requires that you work with yourself. So being realistic around how much you can achieve in 6, 12, 18 or 24 months, but also to manage the expectation from a given client who wants to develop. So they're not expecting that they will go from one level to another without understanding all the steps that are required in between. So for instance, if someone comes and they have a need for developing a certain skill set that their organization may have highlighted that they need to develop to be more successful, for me, this understanding of the framework helps me evaluate what kind of competencies do you really need to have a strong foundation so you can build that skill set that is required by your organization. To give you an example, if it may be that you need to become better at managing stakeholders, which is very typical in bigger organizations, that if you're not good at stakeholder management, you're not very successful. Then someone may say, can you help me become better at managing stakeholders? Of course I can. The question is, however, is it something we can work on right now, or do you need to work on other things? So for you to really develop your stakeholder management, you need to have a strong empathy. And to have a strong empathy, you need to understand yourself well. So your self-awareness has to be developed to a certain extent for you to understand other people as well. If your self-awareness is not very high, and that may be rooted in that your self-reflection is fairly limited at this point of time in your life, then it will be very difficult to come and realize and improve stakeholder management in a short period of time. But it can help you identify that what we need to work on right now is developing your self-reflective capacity. That will gradually build your self-awareness. With your self-awareness, your empathy would automatically grow. And as your empathy grows, you begin to understand stakeholders in a very different way. Hence, you can work with them in a more constructive way and achieve your ultimate goal to become good at stakeholder management. But as you can hear, it also defines that very often there is steps. So being realistic around what you can achieve within a given period of time is very important for you to really manage people's expectation and also keep up the momentum and energy from a given person who is trying to develop themselves. So they don't end up being disappointed or in other way losing interest in working with themselves, because they may suddenly realize that the change is not happening overnight. I also think that vertical development can be used in many other ways, not only for executive coaching. So when I talk leadership development, it also comes down to what kind of competencies are a given organization putting a high focus on. So some organizations have what you call a leadership competency framework, which defines what kind of competencies should a leader have if they're a senior manager, a middle manager, junior manager, and just a normal employee. Many corporates do not have such a setup. And the vertical development, because it's so descriptive around what each stage gives and what capacities will begin to appear at the different stages, really help organization define a framework that they can use, which is fit for their organization and the needs they need for the different leadership positions. When speaking with clients, another area that also comes up is, for instance, the graduate programs. So many very large corporates have graduate programs, minor companies maybe not so often. But a graduate program has the intention to accelerate talented young people up so they become ready to lead much faster than other employees in the organization, because the organization evaluates that these people have the right material so they can grow fast and become the new talent pool for an organization. But in some organizations, the graduate program have a tendency to focus a lot on various things that people should learn. But in many organizations, the graduate program tends to focus more on the horizontal development of their talent and less on the vertical development of them. So you may use a lot of effort and funds and money to develop competencies within project management, competencies within presentation technique, competencies within things that you can put people on courses with. But how much do these organizations look into what are the vertical development needs that these young talent need to take? Because very often when you come out from high school, universities and so forth, you have been very, very strong in various skills that are on the horizontal scale, but you haven't been nursed and developed so much on your vertical space. So adding more on the horizontal will clearly make the talent stronger, but it may not generate and deliver those results that are really needed for these graduates to be able to step into higher position in an accelerated way. And in my conversations with corporates, one of the things that is very interesting is that by defining some of the capacities that will come at the higher stages as being areas that should be developed during a graduate program, you really ensure that when the graduates come out, that they are actually ready to take up more senior positions, not just based on their horizontal development, which has become solid and they have learned some things that other peers may not have learned, but also that they operate at a level where they have more of the vertical capacities that are really needed to become a successful leader in higher positions. So how many people do really operate at the different stages then? Well, it depends a little bit around which statistic you're looking into, but some statistics indicate that up to 80–85% of a given leadership population would operate at the first two stages. So that would be the expert stage and the achiever stage. Some of these 80–85 may even operate at lower stages. Then you have the 15%, of which a large part of the 15, maybe 10%, would be operating at the catalyst level. And then you may only have 5% over the last two stages, which are very rare in leadership to see people operating at the very high stages, which are the co-creator and the alchemist level. There is differences. In learning-oriented organization, you would typically see a higher proportion in the higher stages, whereas in organization not so focused on developing their employees, you would see a larger chunk in the lower stages. That comes down to many different factors. Firstly, if you actively invest in people vertical developing, can be many different approaches to do that. It can be by, for instance, executive coaching, but equally much if you have very good leaders and managers operating at the higher stages, they will, per definition, kind of lift up the leadership population because they act as very solid role models. They demonstrate new ways of doing things, different ways to do things, and will typically also give a lot of feedback to people in the organization operating at the lower stages, helping them to grow up the vertical ladder. So in many ways, it depends on which organization you're working in, but these are the statistics kind of indicating how many people are operating. So it gives you a ballpark figure. So this was kind of the high level setup of horizontal and vertical development. I hope it gave you some clarity around what the difference is and also in which areas the different kind of development is falling within. Over the next series, I will go more in depth with the 5 different leadership stages, but before doing that in the next episode, I'll just draw a parallel to the sports world around why it's so interesting to actually understand vertical development and how it can help you understand where you are and how that can benefit you in your personal development. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you will listen to the next podcast. And if you believe that someone would benefit from listening to it, do make a recommendation. If you have a comment, do write it in the commentary field below in my podcast on YouTube. And otherwise, I hope to see you in the next episode. All the best. Bye-bye.